this is our fourth and final panel talk for this afternoon with Miss Karen Senefuru, who's all the way here from Oakland, California, to talk about her exhibition, Black Woman is God, that was at the San Francisco Soma Cultural Arts Center in Oakland, California. So without further ado, Karen Senefuru.
Well, before I get started, I want to first and foremost thank Amber Robles-Gordon and Mikhail Solomon for having me be here. I want to give thanks to them. Let's please give them some love for that. Their work reminds me of what Alva DuVernay said about Black women coming together. She says, when there's 3 or more Black women in a room, conjuring begins. And so I say to that, let the conjuring begin. Let's move forward on this. So this particular piece here was in the exhibition, The Black Woman is God. It's an installation I created called Call Your Mama. And back on the shelf here are 3 small sculptural pieces and a telephone that was off the hook of the phone. And the implication is that if you step into the red room, you became the transmitter and the receiver of the knowledge that you needed to move yourself forward. So The Black Woman is God was a project I created in 2013 with Melora Green. And we were holding a conversation around the idea of what it means for Black women to struggle and able to overcome those struggles. And so she asked me the question, why do you think that is? And I said, well, the Black woman is God, of course. And so as soon as she heard that, she says, well, that's the title of a show that I'd like for you to do. At that time, she was the curator of the AAACC, or the African American Art and Cultural Complex in San Francisco, and she wanted to give me a solo show, but I wasn't interested in that. I was much more interested in creating space for artists that had never shown before, artists that were emerging artists, artists who were veteran artists that had been creating for 20 or 30 years and people didn't know about them, and then luminaries. I wanted to create a space where all these artists, luminaries, veterans, emerging artists, new artists, could all be in the same space together and create. So our first exhibition was in 2013. We had 18 visual artists, 18 performing artists. With the exhibition that happened at Somar's Gallery in San Francisco, there were 60 visual artists with over 125 pieces of artwork that were shown and over 75 performing artists. The way I divided up a 2,200 space was to divide it in 4s, and I divided it in connection to what you're seeing now, which is the logo for The Black Woman is God. And the red center, the representing the article, became the symbol of my red room. It was the center of the space, and it was the witness to all of the creations that were happening in the space. And so, could you go to the next piece? So that logo is based upon the Kalunga cosmogram cross, and it has a lower and upper levels to it. The lower level represents the spirit world, the ancestral world, and the upper level represents the living world. And the idea was to take this cross and reconstruct the cross in the gallery space itself, so that each one of the themes that are associated with the spirit traveling around itself and back into itself to ultimately become an ancestor became the design of the gallery space itself. So on the day of the procession, the day of the exhibition, we gave a procession. This week was incredibly powerful for us because there were 2 very defining killings within the Black community the week of the exhibition. The exhibition was on Thursday. 2 killings had happened. One was on Tuesday and one was on Wednesday. And Melora Green, my co-curator, said that we need to pay homage to that, especially since the exhibition itself was about connecting the spirits to the living self. And so we created the procession that led into the gallery. And here are some of the artists. And one of the things that you notice about this exhibition is that it's intergenerational. I wanted young artists, but I wanted veteran artists. So there's a wide range of people who are in this space. This young woman here, Ayana Avery, created an incredible sculptural piece that was of a Black Madonna. She had never created in a gallery space before. It stood about 6 feet. So one of the things that I've discovered about connecting to people who say that they create only in the home is that they tend to be some of the most powerful artists because they're not judging themselves. Next slide. So the 2 killings were, of course, of PHILANDO, CASTILLE, and ALTON Sterling. And that one of the killings that was caught on Facebook live streaming was by Diamond Reynolds. And I particularly like this piece because you see the women right before the procession using their phones, but you also see in the background what appear to be a storm, and it's as if they are starting to manifest the deities within the Orisha cosmology. So I see them as Oya, dialing in the storm. And the young woman on the far right corner who was pregnant at the time is pleased. So God is pleased. Next slide, please. So as I said to you, this was an intergenerational exhibition. Here are young women who were performing outside of the exhibition. There was a stage outside because there was concern that there were going to be so many people coming to the exhibition. We thought it was going to be about 800 people. My initial desire was that it would be 500. We ended up having somewhere close to 2,000 people show up for the reception. It was definitely a historic reception in San Francisco and Northern California. And so these women were the first artists to open up the exhibition, and I saw them as the threshold or the Kalunga line, which represents water. Who these women are, they're part of an organization called the Young Gifted in Black in Oakland, and then they created a subgroup called the Sheros. And in the Young Gifted in Black, as well as the Sheros, they learn about the history of the African diaspora, and then they go into the community and they perform that history through art, through performance, poetry, and singing. And so you see them in these gestures of the griot, contemporary griots. So again, I wanted to use young women as the threshold and actually pushing the exhibit forward, the reception forward. Here we have Lyrics Performance Academy, and they're really phenomenal because this idea that the body contains history, the body is a container of history, a container of narrative, was very well exemplified in their dance performance. That was a combination of praise dance, modern dance, as well as a tribute to John Legend's song, Glory. So if you go to the next clip, and we're going to play the video. before I talk about Amara Tabler-Smith, I want to go back and talk about the young women and the importance of them being in that space and performing and actually seeing their bodies as a representation of protest art. I think that that's really rare, and it also talks about the idea of what it means for young black girls to not have innocence or to have to lose innocence in order for them to be in the world and to be safe. And so their dance performance is a representation of that. So the photographs that they're holding are of those young girls that were killed in Selma, Alabama in the church. And so they're making a link between Selma, Alabama, the black men are being killed, black women and men are being killed by police officers, and what it means for them as young black girls to be in the world and then have to communicate that struggle through their own dance, through their own bodies. Okay, so this artist is very important in the Bay Area. This is Amara Tabler-Smith, and she does a lot of public art. And works that she's doing right now are called A House Full, and it's a house full of black women. And what they do is they dress up as orishas. They wear white. Primarily, they cover themselves in veils, and they carry lanterns, and they go into areas in the community, and they draw beves on the ground as witnesses of something important happening there. And so one of the things that she likes to do with her art is to engage public. And that engagement may not, in fact, be one where people feel comfortable with her presence, but she knows that she's creating discombobulation in the space. And so you can look at some people are acting as if she doesn't exist, which I think is very interesting, because how could you not see her? To ignore her means that you had to see her. There are others who are looking very directly at her, and others who are very nervous about what this means. And so she's paying homage to Sarah Baartman. And you may be familiar with her. There's a photograph in one of the gallery spaces of Renee Cox also paying homage to Sarah Baartman, who came to Europe in the 1500s, and her body was actually seen as overly sexualized and dehumanized. She was only in Europe for about 5 years before she died of alcoholism and sexually transmitted disease. So Amara is paying tribute to her, and also in that tribute, the blue becomes the symbol of ancestry. So that was very important to this exhibition, that art wasn't just simply beautiful pieces on the wall or beautiful pieces for people to look at and contemplate, but to engage with it on some level or another. And she stayed in that performance for 2 hours. And as the gallery space filled up, and you can see what's filling up with the young girls, she navigated through that space like that. So the first stage of the exhibition is called Kala, and for the cosmogram, it means childhood. For the exhibition, it meant Sister Divine. And so this particular installation was in the floor of the gallery, and it was created by the curator, Melora Green, and her sister, Melanie Green, who are twins. And so this particular installation was called the Mbeje altar, and it required people to sit down around the altar in order to look down into it. So there was a physical connection between the artwork and the people who were coming to it. And also in this space, you have individuals who are using abstract art as representing sisterhood as a spirit, as a sense, as essence, as opposed to a particular portrait or form. Next slide, please. So one of the pieces inside the sisterhood is Sister Divine is Nicole Dixon. And Nicole Dixon likes to use charcoal and acrylic and other components to create her work. This is actually a wooden panel that is standing away from the canvas. This is about what it means for young girls to be able to claim themselves, to claim their beauty in public, and how that becomes a divinity. This piece is by Frances Mead, and Frances Mead takes on the idea of what it means to be a woman, and a woman who is loving another black woman in an intimate way, and making the argument that when one has a sexual relationship with the female presence, one sees God in the self. This is Karen Turner. And Corinne Turner is a very interesting artist to me. Most of her paintings are of a black woman in very voluptuous form, and always there's the watermelon with the artist. And I think that this is important because she invites the viewer to reclaim the watermelon. And it also takes on this idea of what are the elements of shame that black people were told to accept? What were some elements of shame that are part of our identity? And one of those things is a very human thing, and that is the practice of eating, just eating food that we feel is sacred to us. And so the watermelon is a very sacred fruit. And not only is she saying the watermelon is a sacred fruit, but black women's hair. And so she intertwines the sacred fruit with the hair, and saying both of these entities represents the importance of claiming the self. This piece is by Fan Lee Warren, and she calls it migration. And she talks about what are the challenges of black children, particularly black girls, to know themselves, and how do they migrate in their neighborhoods. And she says oftentimes they do it in very tragic ways because they don't know. So you can see that there are some who are walking towards the circle but not following the cosmology of walking in a circle. And then you see some walking away from it, some watching, but no one really has a true direction in which they should be moving as a group, as a collective. The second stage of the cosmogram is called Tukala Adulthood. For the Black Woman is God exhibition, it was called Politics. Next one. So, one of the things that I found very interesting about the artists in this exhibition, and this piece is by Shona McDonald, is that beauty and claiming beauty became very central to expose in this exhibition. And it's one of the most challenging elements of what it is to be a black woman. This piece is actually three-dimensional. The photograph is actually not doing it justice. So the beading on the back of the neck here are literally beads. The fish on the top of the head is, well, it's not a live fish, but she found a fish and integrated it into the piece. And so when you see the piece for the first time, you want to touch it. And certainly that stance is an indication that one shouldn't. And so this is someone who is, it's very political for a black woman to claim herself. And it's very political for a black woman to claim herself in public, a space where oftentimes it's very dangerous for her. And so to claim the body in public becomes a resistance to annihilation. And the ability to do that also means she has a recognition of sustaining herself and sustaining her community through her ability to claim her beauty. This piece is by Tarika Lewis, and it's called the resealing of the California seal of Califia. Tarika Lewis is very important because she's the first woman to join the Black Panther Party. She did her DNA recently and found out that she was the first cousin of LL Cool J. And some of you may have seen that PBS program with Henry Louis Gates, where he found out that his grandparents were not actually his blood parents, and that would not have happened had not Tarika Lewis actually started the journey for him and their family way across the other end of the country. They had never met. Now, what's interesting about that is that those of you who may know LL Cool J's music, one of his album covers is called Panther, and he's on the cover with a panther. And then the other interesting thing is that he talked about how he knew he and his mother enjoyed and loved boxing. He didn't know that his grandfather, Tarika Lewis's uncle, was a famous boxer. And that Tarika Lewis's father was also a famous boxer. His name was John Lewis, and he fought Joe Louis. And so this family, the Lewis family, just made up a first. And so she created this particular piece dedicated to Calafia because she wants to challenge the California seal of Calafia as a white woman. So she's always... just a very dynamic woman, and I'm always very excited about her being in the piece, in the exhibit. She also created the music for a film I'm going to show you at the end, a short film I did called Hot Comb the Masquerade, and so she along with Destiny Muhammad, created the music. Next. So in this space was a mural. And this is the third stage of the Cosmic Ground Cross. For the Cosmic Ground is called Luvimba, or Elderhood, and for the exhibition it was called Motherhood. And so here are two pieces that are different in size, but both are dynamic, I think. The sculptural piece here is Mana Beverly Johnson, and this piece is called Earth. And she said that she created this piece because she wanted to talk about what it means for womanhood to always be framed within the feminist movement. And she wanted to move away from that, and she said recenter women embedded in the earth, embedded in one of the most important and dynamic parts of who they can be, which is to create. Right, and to create both biologically, but also as artists, right? The mural here is by well, let me back up again. Amana is been creating for maybe about 20 or 30 years. She has public art all over California. The artist above her is Sage Stargate. She's 22 years old. This was the first time that she's ever done a mural this size. She did it by herself in 5 days. 22. So I think that they played very well off of each other. So this mural here was looking at the relationship of the black woman's womb to that of the universe, and to also point out that the regenerating of the blackness is at the core of what it is to be a black woman. And that transformation not only happens for herself, but it happens for the whole community when she's in line with who she is. Could you go back to that piece? So in the corner here is actually a doorway that links to this mural. And this doorway becomes the vulva of the exhibition. And so we're going to go inside. Next slide. So in this space, this was the annex of the gallery space. And this was taken over by a young collective group called House of Malako. And there's 20 young women who are in their, who were probably no older than 30. Most of them were very young women. And so they took over the space from the ceiling all the way and on the walls and on the floor. And they used every form of medium that you can think of. And so for them, it was transforming the space, transforming themselves, transforming art as a way of showing the divinity of the Black woman as a creative force. This is one of the images that you're greeted with when you walk inside the annex. And this photograph is, I believe it's by Sasha Kelly. And Sasha Kelly took this photo along with about 20 other images of women a few years ago in an exhibition called You Gods, capital U. And I think this particular image is provocative because the woman is standing as if she has clothes on. I mean, it's the same pose one would have with clothes on. And so she's very confident about her body, she's confident about her presence, but there's also a nakedness here, but there's no vulnerability. And it's almost as if she's daring the viewer to stare at her. Right, go ahead, take a look. I dare you. Right? And so there's a confrontation with this particular image. The attachments that she has on her body are also created by one of the artists in the collective, and they become a form of adornment, but also shields of protection. And the image indicates a triangularization of Black beauty. And the image behind you is a painting that I did some years ago. Okay, so this lady here is very phenomenal, another young woman in her early 20s. We got into 16 publications for this exhibition, which was really phenomenal. We weren't expecting that at all, and it started roller coasting. And in the exhibition, in these publications, one of the images that kept coming up, and again was this photo by Yetunde Longbaja. And she makes the argument that, well, first the title of the piece is called Mammy Mammy. And she makes the argument that what does it mean for Black women historically to have to pass the immune system through the breast milk? What does that mean? What does it mean to have a Black woman actually bring protection through breast milk for a Black child that would become a man, that would be confronted by a white child who will become the man? What does it mean to both try to protect your child, but also being forced to pass on the immune protection to a white child who will become the tools of oppression? And the complexity of that for the Black woman's body, right? You can't get more Black woman as God than that. Right? And what's interesting about what's in the middle of these two photographs is almost like a time chart. At the top, she has a very ancient Yoruba sculpture with a child strapped to the body, representing Mother Divine. But as you go down, and you can't see it because there's individuals in front of it. As you go down these photographs, and some of them are derogatory images of Black women as mammies on television or in film, she discovers the slave master. She found out who the slave master was of her family, and she put his photo among these photos. Yeah, very phenomenal young woman. Next photo, please. This is a painting that's mixed media by Nicole Dixon. And she likes to focus on the seen and unseen, and also images that represent iconic or archetypal images of nature, and how those images become symbolic of the Black female presence. So you get the complexity and geometry in the background, and you can see that that's being reflected on the colors of the jacket. But that intricacy behind you is also placed in the child's hair. So that this particular section, the fourth stage of the cosmogram, is called adornment. It's called MUSONI for the Kalanga cosmogram, which means ancestor or rebirth. But for our space, it was adornment. And that was really important because, again, in order for black women to adorn themselves, in order for young girls, black girls to see themselves as beautiful, they have to kill off the self that devalues who they are in the world. This piece is by Idris Hassan, who was such a phenomenal supporter of the exhibition. She documented the exhibition and created a documentary out of it. She also helped me edit the film you're going to watch very soon called Hot Comb, The Masquerade. And she's also a photographer, so just a multimedia artist, very incredibly talented. And the title of this piece is called Shade. And I love that because when you think about how shade works in the black community, it can be something that you project onto people in a very negative way, right? So, you know, when women speak poorly about other folks, like, ooh, she was throwing shade. But in this case, she's talking about what it means to shade oneself through beauty, what it means to take an umbrella and use it as a symbol of connecting to the ancestors, particularly those women who used to carry parasols to church. It became not just simply a way of shading the self, but also drawing attention to the self through beauty. So I want to also introduce you to the dancers. So some of the dancers, well, the main dancer or choreographer was Colette Eloy, a Haitian woman who has been living in the Bay Area for over 20 years. And when she initially told me that she was going to have dancers perform, I said, just make sure that when they move into the space, they move counterclockwise. I wanted it to have a physical movement of the cosmogram, to move in the opposite direction of Western thought. And so we're going to see them moving in a circle. But what I also want to say to you is that she initially told me there were going to be 6 dancers. And then the day of the exhibition, she says, well, I'm bringing more dancers. And I said, okay, how many more? And she says, well, I'm going to bring a total of 35 dancers. And I went, oh, okay. I tried not to palpitate. And then I said, because I knew that the exhibition was going to be crowded, and I didn't know how they were going to maneuver this. And then she says, and I'm bringing maybe 7 drummers. And I went, right? Yeah. She was texting, but that's what I said when she texted me that. I went, okay. But I want you to see what she brought into the space and how she became water for the exhibition. So I'd like to show you the film that was also in the exhibition. It's about 12 minutes. It's called Hot Comb the Masquerade. And this piece is about deities coming together to challenge the community to reclaim itself. And so that's the title, Hot Comb as a Masquerade.
you.